In the 14th chapter of Acts, when Paul and Barnabas returned from the first journey, they came to the church at Antioch of Syria, and the record says that when they came, they gathered the church together and rehearsed all things that God had done with them, and they opened the door of faith unto the Gentiles. That's the 27th verse of the 14th chapter. I don't claim to be Paul, of course, but it's right for us to talk about works in other areas. And there's a prime example of that we find with Paul and Barnabas from the church at Antioch. And I think that we can see the wisdom of God in some of this when we see about what's going on in other places, difficulties that are faced, obstacles overcome, and it can help us. And so I talked with Landon about the possibility of swapping times this morning, because usually we have more of our people here on Sunday mornings and more visitors on Sunday night. So that's the purpose of our changing as we have this morning. The last few weeks have been busy. After school was out, the first week we traveled down to South Georgia for a meeting that was in the place called Hoboken, which is right outside Waycross, where we lived for about 4 years in the 80s. And then we came back on a Saturday. Our meeting started on Sunday, and then on Friday of the 6th of June, I flew out to Atlanta, then on to Venice, and then to Aviano in northern Italy until the 16th when I returned. And so it's been 4 or 5 weeks have been busy. And I wanted to share with you some things that I noticed on these trips, not just Italy, but some things that happened even in South Georgia. Hoboken is a small community about 10 miles to the east of Waycross, Georgia. And you can see this is where it is. It's about 50 miles from the Atlantic coast, southeast Georgia. And you'll notice on the map here that this is not even mentioned, but here's Waycross, Georgia. And we stayed there. And I'd like to say just a few things about the congregation there. The church in Waycross evidently began about 1937 or 38. The Garnto families from Valdosta, which is the largest city in South Georgia, had moved to Waycross for work. Both Sam and James were Christians, and they really began the work there. And in time, they built a building, and in time, it prospered. When we were there in the 80s, we had a goodly number. We were able to do a number of things on radio every day, on newspaper articles. Media was still cheap during those days, and we had sufficient resources to do a lot of the work. This is the building that is the Waycross building. The part that you see that faces you was actually the original structure. And about 1960 or 61, when Pete McKee was there, part of the wing there was added, and that what became the auditorium. And then the old part of the building became the classrooms there. And again, we had a wonderful time there. Our son was born when we were during that time of our lives in the late 80s in Waycross. And things have gone fairly well. However, there were some problems about 10 years ago in the congregation there. And I've been able to listen to some sides, and I not being there, it'd be hard for me to tell exactly, except just going on the words of those who were there. But there were some brethren who let some things go, and some people needed to be withdrawn from and weren't. There was a preacher that came, and from all indication, he was a womanizer, and some didn't know about it, others did, and then others didn't want to do anything about it. And so there led to be a real problem in the church at Waycross. However, I'm still thankful for all the good that's been accomplished there and is perhaps still being accomplished, though I'm not so privy to everything that's going on. What you see is a directory that was there, and that actually what we have, and it was the directory that was there when we started to Waycross in 1986. We went in the summer of 86, Lee and I did. We were only been married a few months. But I want you to notice that there's a name here by the name of Orville Vick. Brother Vick lived close by, just a few blocks from the building at the time. His wife just didn't want to be married to him anymore and finally divorced him. He had several children. None of them were faithful. But Brother Vic was faithful when we were there. And we got to be close to him. He was old enough just about to be my granddaddy. But we got to be close to him. And he came simply as a result of when the church there had gospel meetings. People would go and hand out flyers, and he got interested and came. And he was faithful to the end of life, and we appreciated him so much. But there was another lady who was a member of the church, Sister Jessie Robbins. I don't know if you can see her name over here, but she's right over here in this corner. And Sister Robbins had some children, ended up not being faithful. She had a granddaughter that was faithful when we were in Waycross. But she worked in basically a hamburger joint for a while, and she had a friend. And this friend she invited to services with her on occasion, and her name was Carrie Waldron. And you've heard me tell the story, but I wanted to repeat it because I love it. And Sister Carrie didn't know much about the truth, but her husband really wasn't interested. She had a girl by the name of Kathy and a son by the name of Bob. And in time, Carrie was baptized, and then her daughter Kathy and her son Bob was baptized. In time, Earl Kimbrough was preaching there and encouraged Bob to go to Florida College, and as some say, the rest is history. He met Sandra Lee, and Bob and Sandra, as you know, have been here and preached and taught. As comes as a result of a lady who had practically nobody in her family who were Christians, encouraging a lady to come with her to services. And Bob's father, Bob told me later, obeyed the gospel later in life, but was not really that zealous. His mother was. His sister ended up being unfaithful. And so you have limited number of people, but you still have people who love the Lord and wanted to do what's right. And there's a tremendous lesson in all of that for us. I'll come back to that we can't ever discount the good we can do by a simple invitation. Come to services with me. We have a Bible class going on Wednesday night or whenever it is. Come with me to that. You can do that. I can do that. And that's what happened there. We've got a gospel meeting on. Would you like to come? The worst that can be said is not interested. That's the worst. And who knows, but your invitation, your encouragement can cause a lot of good that can be done. Well, during the time, I didn't go for Waycross, I went for Hoboken. But I wanted to give you the background because the church there had a split about 10 years ago, and a community about 10 miles from there, Hoboken, is where they had decided to, some brethren had decided to relocate. And so they've been there preaching among themselves, and we'll say more about that in just a moment. But when I went there, I actually stayed in Blackshear, which is the circle above the point here. Blackshear is equally about 10 miles from Waycross in the northeastern direction, and then I'd go south to Hoboken. There was a straight highway there. Blackshear had a congregation meeting there in the 80s when I was there. In fact, in the 70s, probably around the early 70s, Brother Leon Malden, some of you know, his first work was in Blackshear. By the time I got there, years after Leon had been there were some problems in the Blackshear congregation. There were some problems with marriage and divorce. And that's the building now. That's in the same city where I was staying. That's the Blackshear church building. And no one with whom I spoke knew if they were even meeting. And from the picture I took, you can see the sign on the porch. I don't believe there's any sign of life in that congregation whatsoever. And that's sad to me, but they seemed like they had some people there who did not want to take a stand on divorce and remarriage. And word got out and it just kind of fizzled down to nothing. I think that's 3 or 4 lessons I think can be learned from all this. That we ought not to ever discount the good we can do by being salt and light in the community around us. You can quote that passage that we have on the chart where Jesus says, "You're the salt of the earth." If the salt have lost its savor, you're thenceforth good for nothing but to be cast out and trodden under the foot of men. You're the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hid, neither do men light a lamp and put it under a bushel, but on a stand, so that it gives light to all that are in the house. Then he made the point. Even so let your light shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. Never discount the good that can be done in the time that we have to live. I'm thankful for the good that was accomplished. When we were in Waycross, I mentioned we had radio time as well as newspaper space that we devoted preaching to. And there was a man who came, just showed up on a Wednesday night, and we started studying together. He obeyed the gospel. He's not in Waycross. He's down in Valdosta. He's still faithful. And I'm happy about Edgar. And he's one result that we just through mass media came as a result of that. But we were so happy about things during those years, and we're just thankful that good was accomplished in times past before we were there and even since. And don't be discouraged over what may seem to be no results. When we hand out articles or hand out papers, or we try to encourage people to do right, don't be discouraged if there doesn't seem to be any results. In Hebrews 11 verse 4, concerning Abel, the record says, by faith Abel offered unto God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, through which he had witness borne to him that he was righteous, God bearing witness in respect of his gifts, and though he be dead, he yet speaks. Kerry Waldron, Jesse Robbins, who might, though they be dead, I'm speaking about them right now, and the good that was accomplished through them. I didn't make this point, but it was came full circle. It was through Bob and Sandra that Lee and I got together. And during our time in Waycross, Sister Robbins died. And I was able to lead the singing at that funeral. And I thought, how in the world, things just circle around, don't they? And the very one who was responsible for Sister Carrie and Bob and us, and here she's passing. But anyway, don't be discouraged over what may seem to be no results. The results may be in existence after we are dead and gone. And remember that our own generation is all we have. Passage in Acts, the 13th chapter, when Paul was at Antioch of Pisidia, the record says in verse 36, speaking of David and how he had spoken for the Christ, because he says, for David, after he had in his own generation served the counsel of God, fell asleep and was laid unto his fathers and saw corruption. David, after he had in his own generation served the counsel of God, fell asleep. Now the point I believe Paul makes in that passage is David had his own generation, he died, and he was buried. But he spoke of the Christ in Psalm 2, and the Christ was not going to remain in the grave. But the point I'm lifting from that passage is this, that the only time we have is our own generation. When I was younger, I kept thinking, I want to do this, but I want to do it in a few years from now. I kept thinking life is in the future. And what I have now is kind of preliminary. But the truth of the matter is, we're living in the life right now. We don't know if we'll have 10 years from now. We don't know if we'll have 15. We don't know if we'll have tomorrow, James says. And that's what passages we have there quoted, that we are a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away. And so remember, our own generation is all we have. Whatever good Blackshear did is all over. Whatever good Waycross when it was at its zenith. Those are congregations that did good, but and there's still people there, at least in Waycross. But the generation you have and I have is all you have. And let's do the good that we can. Do what we can with those with whom we have influence while we have opportunity. I came across a quote by John Wesley that I don't, of course, condone everything he taught, but this is biblical. Do all the good you can, by all the means you can, in all the ways you can, in all the places you can, in all the times you can, to all the people you can, as long as ever you can. That's a great statement. I'm reminded, and I love it so much, you've heard me quote it, by Hartzell Wilson's, this is the beginning of a new day. You know that one? God has given me this day to use as I will. I can waste it or use it for good. However, what I do this day is important because I'm exchanging a day of my life for it. When tomorrow comes, this day will be gone forever, leaving in its place something I've exchanged for it. I want it to be good, not evil, gain or success, not failure, in order that I shall not regret the price that I paid for it. That's so biblically sound, that we do what we can while we have opportunity, because one of these days, my friends, we won't have opportunities. Either the Lord will come or we'll be gone ourselves. It's hard for me to, I was telling Lee about this, it's hard for me to believe that 40 years ago we were down there, 39 years. And time is so rapidly fleeting that we want to use our lives for the best we possibly can. Well, I wanted to show you a picture or two. Here's the picture of the Hoboken building, which is out on the main highway. And they had a sign that they used for the meeting that I thought was fairly effective. They pointed out what lessons were going to be on each night. It was one of these that changes, every few seconds, and a lot of people were able to see that. This is Philip Hickox and his wife, Melissa. Melissa was a little girl when we were in Waycross, and now they're married and have 4 children. Some of you know them from the camp. But Philip does a lot of the preaching there. He has his own job. He works for Caterpillar in Waycross in the dealership there. But he does a lot of the preaching and teaching, and there's a wonderful, wonderful couple. And this did not happen during the course of the week, but they have a daughter by the name of Lily. And Lily has been dating for a while a boy they were both juniors this past year in high school. They're coming into their senior year. And Ryan Pittman, the young man's name, came to every service. And one thing that really impressed me was that the Hickox had to be out of town 2 nights for the meeting because of obligations to a wedding that was going on in North Georgia. And during the time they were gone, he came anyway. He was there. I thought he's here because he wants to be, not because it's just a date night with his wife. Well, as a result of that, we talked a lot, and then on the Sunday following, Philip baptized Ryan in a pond. Their baptistry had drained. Somehow there sprung a leak in it, and so. And if you're familiar with South Georgia, it took some faith to be baptized in that pond, because you got all kinds of water moccasins and alligators close by. But there's a picture of Ryan being baptized by Philip. Here's some brethren. Most people had milled out by this time, but this lady was real instrumental in helping us in class work when we were at Waycross. I mentioned to you a while ago the Garnto family. He's the only one that survives, and he's not a Garnto, but he was married to one of the daughters, Bud Montero. He's the only one left. This fellow preaches down in Jennings, Florida, at the Oak Grove congregation. And the Crosbys were in Waycross, and they came over to visit. And this young man here was a teenager when we were there. Things have gone out fairly well for him. In fact, he reminded me of a number of things we did together that I had forgotten. He is actually one of their sons, and he's got a brother who lives in North Alabama, Luke Law, and his wife and his son. Luke also works at the Caterpillar dealership in Waycross, and Luke preaches kind of part-time with Philip Hickox as well. These were just some members. I wanted to take as many pictures as I could. And I know a lot of people don't like people who take pictures, so I had to be judicious about that. Again, some observations. Insofar as the beginning of that congregation, I think there's a lesson. We don't ever want to just go with the flow. As time passes, issues arise, people change, Christians are challenged by those issues, and God can use those issues to make a distinction between who's faithful and who's not. You remember in 1 Corinthians 11, verse 19, Paul said, there must come divisions among you, that they that are faithful may be made manifest among you. those who are favored by God, that is, they're doing the will of the Lord, that they may be manifest. We sometimes used to use the phrase, the cream rises to the top. When you churn milk, and the cream rises to and the butter, and the two separate. It's kind of like that in the sense that a problem that comes in a congregation really manifests who wants to do what's right and who doesn't. Brother Sewell Hall made the comment that he felt like COVID had really been like this. It made a division in churches as who really wants to serve the Lord and who doesn't, based on what happened after the fallout of it. And we have people here who, after COVID, have never darkened the door. And you can see that's what's happened. And issues will separate the wheat from the chaff. And what we wanted to make sure is we don't just go with the flow, that we independently study the Bible for ourselves, and we don't just go with family or friends. We do what is right regardless, even if it opposes family. I went back, in not going back, but on the picture that I had of Philip Hickox. Philip basically was reared a Baptist, and granddaddy's priest, and to obey the gospel meant he was going against his family. The same was true with Ryan, who was baptized just recently. That young man, 17, 18 years old, had been reared in a denomination. He comes out of it because he sees the truth for himself. And that's what we need to do. Make sure you are doing right, regardless of everyone else. And I think another thing to keep in mind, that a lot of times, and I can be just as guilty as anybody, a lot of times we deprecate young people. We find a whole lot who are not faithful, or it doesn't seem like there's a constancy about them. But there are still some who want to do right. And they're young people who are interested in the truth. They're willing to take a stand, even if it means opposing a person's family, and they obey the truth when they learn it. He's a wonderful example of that. Paul said, "Let us not be weary in well-doing, for in due season we will reap if we faint not." Those people, I showed you that group of people who've been faithful through the years. They hold things together. Make sure that there's one. All of that's what each one of us can do. You can do it. We ought not to just depend on, have the attitude, well, they'll take care of they. No, it's us. It's me. I need to be a part. I need to be an integral part of helping the work. If every church member was like I am, how would the church at Pleasant Grove be? Would it cease to exist? Would we only meet one time on Sunday mornings? What would it be like if everybody did exactly what I do? And that's a fair question to ask. We all have influence, and the influence that we wield ought to be that which is good. And if it's not, we ought to be ashamed of ourselves and determine I'm going to change and I'm going to start doing what's right. And I believe those are lessons that I can gain from where I've been. Well, we came back on that Saturday before our meeting started here on Sunday, the 1st of June, and then we were here until that Friday afternoon, and then flew to Aviano, Italy. Aviano is in the northern part of Italy, only about an hour from the Austrian border. You approach it, or at least you fly in there. The closest airport is Venice. So I went from here to Atlanta and Atlanta to Venice. And then after a while, Brother Brandon Solomon, who does most of the preaching and teaching, you know him. He's been here with us on 2 occasions. And Brother Jerry Seward, who's turned 77 while we were there. He and Brandon came together, picked me up, and then we just did a little driving around. They showed me around. It's a picture taken about just a few yards from Brandon's house. It's looking northward. Those are the Alps behind in the background that you see. It's a very beautiful, beautiful country. And this is just a little village. Bedoya is actually outside Aviano, which is where Brandon lives and where we walked even that Saturday night. And guess what we had? We had a pizza, an Italian pizza there. We started on Sunday, and Brandon told me early on that it may be a little different, not just like a usual gospel meeting. They wanted me to preach, but also wanted several of our sessions during the evening to be more question answer, kind of like a Bible class, which is basically how we did it. We would talk a little bit about some subjects that had been requested, and then there would be follow-up question answer. So it was almost just like kind of a extended Bible class situation. And they had some good subjects that some that were kind of came up after we got there. One asked if we'd talk about the unpardonable sin, and one just talk about the Holy Spirit. I thought that's pretty wide open. You know, not where you start is where you end on that subject. Then the problems over authority. We talked about that. The difference between general and specific authority primarily. We had a lesson on that. Social drinking. As you know, in Italy, drinking of wine is, in fact, I didn't take, I had some pictures, but I didn't show them. That people grow grapevines all in there. I mean, that's just all over the place. And they're known, as you know, for their wine. But Christians there, most of them, don't drink. They don't do it. They go to restaurants. That's common. That's more common than a glass of tea. In fact, you get wine easier than you get unsweet tea. Believe you me, I ask. And but there are Christians there who don't. And yet there's some young Christians there in Aviano who have problems with that, and they wonder about that. So we spent some time talking about that. I didn't mention this, but you may know this already. The significance of that, of going there, comes from Brandon Solomon. Brandon grew up with our Wes. He's about a year younger. We knew his parents. His granddaddy was one of the elders of the congregation where we worked in Athens. And we were close to the family. And Brandon grew up and wasn't sure what he wanted to do. He was in business administration, then hospital administration, and then he joined the Air Force, primarily to get into that. And then he's been in Mississippi and Ohio, and then he spent about 3 years in Aviano. Aviano is our last outpost, Air Force base, before you get to Russia. It's a maximum security base. He doesn't fly planes, but he's in the hospital administration. It's a base of about 7,000 people. So there's a lot of Americans who are there. Now, what's significant, you see on the picture here, they're meeting in a storefront. Now, I say a storefront, it's a building. It's the front of a building. That's just this. I took a picture of that. But what happened was that they were meeting on the base for a while, and the base allowed various religious groups to meet and give them, room and chalkboard and whatever they needed, whiteboards. And in time, when the chaplain found out that there was an exchange of money, that they were giving on the first day of the week, the chaplain said that you can't do that. It has to go through me. So then they basically was going to the chaplain, and he would redistribute that to whatever. Well, they did. That was a no-go. So they began seeking to find a place elsewhere. And they eventually came across this place, which they are renting in the front. Brandon, Jerry, and some others secured some benches. Those are basically picnic benches that they found and put those in the building they have. You can see the bathroom is to the back, and they have the benches, and then they have, this is a picture I took before services began. And what you can tell that this is actually that. So what they did is they turned around, so the benches were facing this way, and now they're facing that way right now. And these are a few people who were just before services began. I just snapped a picture of the congregation as it was beginning to meet. This is a better picture of everyone from a few months back. This was not made while I was there. But you can see Brother Jerry Seward is in the blue in the front. He and his wife, Janice, have been there he's been there a longer time. They haven't been married but just a few years. But Brother Jerry moved to Aviano in 1968. He was in the Air Force, And he was converted when he was living in Texas years ago, and he wanted to be faithful. And he started meeting with a congregation that was south of there. And then he heard about a fellow who had come and was wanting to kind of get the work started in Aviano, so he was all for it. And he came and helped. And he's really been there since, how you do the math, that's 57 years. He's been in the area. He knows Italian fluently. He will tell you otherwise. But I believe you me. He took me through a market on Tuesday that I was there that morning. We went through, it's kind of like a flea market all through Aviano. He'd go about four or five paces, and then he would begin speaking in Italian to somebody he knew because he's been there for a good long time. But I mention him because he does what he can preaching and teaching. But he's been faithful all that time and trying to encourage others to do the same. And unlike Waycross, and unlike here and some other places where you have people who generally come and don't go, he calls it a revolving door. You have people come in the Air Force and they learn about the truth, or they might already be members, and they come and then they're there only a few years, maybe 2, or it's Brandon 3 or 4 years. Brandon's supposed to leave in June of next year, so that may be about 4 years for him. But they come and then they go, and it just seems more difficult to have a long-lasting, influence for good. But you do the good you can while you have the opportunity with whomever you have the ability to do it. And that's what he's done. And I guess the trip made me come to a greater appreciation for the good that he's done, along with his sweet wife, Janice. Here he is again, and this is a group picture made on a mountain not far out. This is Janice's wife. Both of them have been here. They're planning to be here, come back in the States in the fall. This is Brandon and his son Sawyer and wife Kim, and their daughter Naomi, named after his grandmother. There's a fellow back here who has done a lot of good. This fellow back here, Ronnie, is Brandon baptized him, his wife, not too many months ago, maybe a year ago. And he is just so excited about the truth that he didn't know it. And he's responsible actually for a couple of these people being here. In fact, during the time I was there, on one of the nights, I'll have to show it. One of the nights, he had invited a fellow from the base, and the fellow was a non-practicing Roman Catholic from San Diego, California. And he came, and he was extremely interested in what was being taught and what was being practiced, and said he would come back. And we gave him, in fact, the little tract we printed, What Must I Do to Be Saved, just a few weeks ago. Got a couple of those, and he was going home and read. So just a lot of things like that going on, just by the virtue of the fact that here's somebody excited about the gospel, encouraged by the very fact that he can be saved, and he wants others to be saved as well. Well, there's some observations. Again, never underestimate the good that can be done by a faithful couple that continues a lifetime of work in difficult places. I've made the point before in talking with young people, especially, who may be contemplating marriage, that Aquila and Priscilla come to be a tremendous illustration of what a godly couple can do. You remember the 18th chapter of Acts. Paul went to Corinth, and he found this couple, and he abode with them. He stayed with them for a while because they were the same trade. They were tent makers. But it's not too much later, if you read through the Bible, in 1 Corinthians, when Paul was at Ephesus, he mentions them and the church that is in their house. And then he wrote the Roman letter, Romans 16, the first few verses. He said, salute Prisca, salute Aquila. And they've hazarded their lives for my... It's almost everywhere they went, the church met in their house. And Paul was so thankful for the good they had done. And I'm thinking about the fact that if Brother Jerry had not been there, or he just given up or gone somewhere else, I don't believe the church in Aviano would exist. I don't believe it would. And the good that Brandon has been able to do would not have been, I don't think it would have been, because Jerry has been a real source of encouragement. Though he's much older, Brandon has more experience preaching and teaching. And because of that, the two working together in their families have been able to do a tremendous amount of good. So never underestimate the long good that can be accomplished by a good couple who's trying to do the will of the Lord. This is a picture on the right bottom of the house. It's a fairly new house, about 300 years old according to them. But here's Jerry and Janice. And on the Sunday, the first Sunday of the meeting, they opened up their home, and there was a couple, Noah and Jill Hoffman, who had just recently married. Noah is a Christian. His wife hasn't obeyed the gospel yet, but they are there. And they opened up their house and kind of gave not only a potluck, but kind of a wedding shower for this young couple. And that kind of dependability and desire to just try to help everybody there, I think, has helped the church to grow. I think the second thing is never be ashamed to talk with others, even a simple invitation, as we mentioned a while ago, to a study, a worship assembly, and all the good that can be accomplished. Even if we don't personally teach, we can get people in touch with those who do. You remember in John 1:40 and 42, Andrew went and found his brother Peter and said, "We found the Messiah." And then in John 1:43 through 51, we have the occasion where Philip goes and he finds Nathanael. And he says, "We have found the Messiah, the one of whom the prophets and the Psalms spoke." And Nathanael said, "Can any good thing come out of Nazareth?" And he said, "Well, come and see. Just investigate for yourself." We can do that. We might not be feel at the time as we can teach a public class, but we can get people in touch with those and invite them to services. We can do that. Never be ashamed. And again, the brother I mentioned a while ago has done that. I want to make another point here, that you'll see this fellow right here, Marciano. He's the one I told you about who came on the Wednesday night of the discussion, the meeting. And he's from San Diego, never been in a service of the Lord's church, evidently never heard the gospel. And he was invited by the man I have circled there. They were sitting together that night. There again, among a lot of young people, there's more openness sometimes. They're not, as the old fellow said, they were not set in their ways. They're not set in their ways. There's an openness, kind of a adventuresome spirit. And that's what we have there. And I appreciated that young man and pray that good will come. We can and should be flexible in areas of judgment, times, location, be open for all kinds of discussions, for questions and answers, all of those things. Most of us are familiar with gospel meetings like we had, where it's a service, invitation, song. It doesn't have to be that way. As long as there's no scriptural principle violated, and we're in a class-like situation and questions, answers can come, certainly that's fine. Times of services were somewhat set by the work schedule of people, which reminded me when I was over there, I've got some old postcards of meetings that were conducted here in the 1920s in Birmingham. And there's a start time of 7:45. And I asked some older people years ago, I said, 7:45. I wonder, we think 7:30. 7:45, a time of start for a tent meeting? And they said that was based on the streetcars that were going through Birmingham. And when people, and sometimes it's good to be flexible along things like that and not be set where the reason we're doing that's because we've always done it that way. There can be value to that, where people can count on constancy. But to know the difference between things that could be changed if necessary to meet the specific needs. And then I'd like to kind of end with this idea. It doesn't matter if you're South Georgia, anywhere on earth, North Alabama, Central Alabama, Northern Italy, when people serve the Lord and enthrone Him in their hearts, want to serve Him faithfully, obey Him as King of their lives, then we're all together in a kingdom that cannot be shaken. The apostle said in Hebrews 12:28, "Wherefore, receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken, let us have grace whereby we may offer service well-pleasing unto God with reverence and awe, for our God is a consuming fire." Sometimes congregations, like I pointed out a while ago with at Blackshear, they'll meet for a while, then there's no existence of the Blackshear congregation. Other congregations we know on the western side of town no longer exist as faithful groups of God's people. And yet the kingdom of God is not shut down because of that. We're part of a kingdom that shall never be shaken, that shall never be destroyed, as Daniel prophesied to Nebuchadnezzar in Daniel 2. In the days of those kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom that shall never be destroyed, nor shall the sovereignty thereof be left to another people. It shall destroy all those other, and it shall stand forever. And we're part of that. There are always people in various pockets everywhere who want to obey the Lord, to obey His gospel, and to be what they ought to be. Well, in a close by city, I don't know if it's any more than 2 or 3 miles from the Aviano and the church building, there's another village, and it has a grotto, an underground stream, really it's an underground river, and it goes extremely deep. It comes out of the mountain and flows down and forms this fairly deep river. I'd say 3, 4, 5 feet deep at various times. And what's significant about that is not it's a grotto, is it forms a tremendous place for people to be baptized in. And Brandon has baptized several in this area, in this river, just in a little close by, in a city close by, and it's cold. But if you have faith in the Lord, cold water for a few seconds is not that bad to endure. And several have in the last 2 or 3 years, and I'm thankful for them. Well, this has been maybe a halfway report of some things that we've experienced, and I hope they've been helpful to you to appreciate what's going on in other parts of the world, how people have responded favorably to the gospel, and how people have been open, they accept the truth, they want to do what's right, and how that's an encouragement to me. And I hope it's an encouragement to you that I always want to be open, I always want to do the Lord's will regardless, and be thankful for those and for opportunities that lead me to those who can help me to see God's truth. If there's someone in our audience this morning, I believe there may be, someone who has not obeyed the gospel, this would be a wonderful time to do so, to put up the Lord on in baptism, say, I want to be a part of that kingdom that cannot be shaken, a part of this church that's composed both of living and dead, and I want to go to heaven, and I believe Jesus I believe on Him with all my heart, and I want to confess my faith in Him as God's Son, and I want to be baptized in water for the remission of sins. I want to be a part of that body of penitent baptized believers who are bound for heaven. If we can help you in any way, come